Hello Magic Makers, welcome to Storytime with Mombierella. This is a young adult fiction and may be inappropriate for some younger viewers.
The Beast Within, A Tale of Beauty's Prince by Serena Valentino. Copyright Disney Enterprises Incorporated, 2014. Chapter 3. The Prince. Before the curse, life had been good to the prince. To hear the sisters tell the tale of the curse would be to hear a story filled with examples of what a terrible person he was. A list of his misdeeds, tallied one by one, each of them worse and nastier than the one before, until the sisters swooped down on him with their spell, deforming him into the pathetic beast now lying on his bedroom floor before his mirror. Eventually, that is indeed how the story will go, but the sisters won't be able to spew that part of the tale at first. Not until the prince has had his say, a chance to tell you how much fun he had. Because there was a time when things were good. It was a time when the prince was just an arrogant young man, full of pride, and keenly aware of his station in life. What young prince hasn't found himself in exactly the same place? What do you think other princes are like? Are they just charming men venturing off, hither and thither in search of sleeping brides, to awaken with love's first kiss? Do you fancy them as dandy gentlemen while they slay dragons and vanquish foul, murderous stepmothers? Perhaps they do that sort of thing without the slightest bit of ego or aggression. One moment they're hacking their way through enchanted killer thorn bushes only to find a fire-breathing dragon, primed for murder on the other side, and the next they're expected to waltz with their new brides in pastel suits and golden sashes. And what is up with those sashes anyway? Horrible. The prince didn't want anything to do with that romantic poppycock. He wanted a different sort of life, and he learned early on he didn't have to slay a fire-breathing beast to get a fair maiden to kiss him. Though swaggering in with the corpse of a giant elk or a fearsome grizzly bear slung over his shoulder for old man Higgins to stuff and mount on the tavern wall, did get him his fair share of smooches from the young ladies. And as dangerous as it might have been at times, it was a far cry from poison apples, stinky dwarfs, or being burnt alive by an evil fairy queen. He'd take hunting and philandering over that stuff any day. Life was good. Everyone loved and worshipped the prince, and he knew it. As he sat in his favorite tavern, his clothes covered in earth, grime, and the blood from his latest kill, he couldn't have been more handsome, or at least that was what he thought. The tavern was his favorite haunt. It had most everything he loved in one place. The wood walls were so crowded with the forest beast he'd slain that old man Higgins laughed and teased him as he poured him another beer.
"I'm going to have to build a larger tavern, Prince."
And it was true. The only people who killed almost as many animals as the prince was his good friend, Gaston, who slammed a handful of coins upon the bar, startling poor Higgins before he could finish pouring the new round of drinks.
"Drinks on me tonight, Higgins, in celebration of the prince's engagement."
The men cheered, and the barmaids wilted into tears, their bosoms heaving heavy sighs of disappointment. Gaston seemed to enjoy the spectacle as much as the prince did.
"She's the most beautiful girl in the village. You're a lucky man. I'd be jealous if you weren't the very best of my friends."
That he was, Gaston's best friend. They had always been alike, Gaston and the prince supposed that was why they had enjoyed each other's company so well. Or perhaps he felt it was better to keep his competition close at hand. But then again, he wondered if that was how he'd actually seen it then. The prince couldn't help laughing sometimes while listening to Gaston go on about himself, bragging about his cleft chin, showing off his hairy chest, and singing his own praises up and down the town's many thoroughfares. However, there was another side to the prince's old friend, a vindictive cruelty about him. Yes, they were very much alike, Gaston and the prince. And that is what brought them together. Gaston was the first to let the prince know his fiancée, Circe, was from a poor farming family, in an attempt to prevent the prince from shaming himself by marrying someone so low. Of course, he couldn't marry her, no matter how beautiful she was. How could his subjects take the daughter of a pig farmer seriously as their queen? The servants wouldn't respect her, and she wouldn't know how to act in diplomatic situations. No, it would be a disaster. It would be unfair to his subjects and to her, and most of all, to him. He didn't need anyone to tell him it was a poor idea. He came to the conclusion himself, the moment he discovered her situation in life. And then the decision was made. He couldn't marry the girl. The prince sent for his fiancée the next day. Cersei looked beautiful when she stepped out of the carriage to meet him. Her light blonde hair and shimmering silver dress glistened under the morning sun as she stood in his rose garden. It was hard to believe she was a pig farmer's daughter. Perhaps Gaston was mistaken. Where would a girl on a pig farm get a dress like that? Gaston was playing his tricks again, trying to put him off so he could have Cersei for himself. That wicked butt-chin brute. He would have words with him about this soon enough. But in the meantime, he had to make amends with his beautiful Cersei. Of course, she had no idea he had intended to break things off. But he felt his heart had betrayed her.
My darling Cersei, you look beautiful.
She looked up at him with pale blue eyes, with a slight blush that did not diminish the light smattering of freckles across her button nose. Adorable. She was simply that, adorable. How could he have thought she was the daughter of a pig farmer? He couldn't fathom her mucking about with those dirty, horrible creatures. Think of it, Cersei feeding pigs. It was laughable when he saw her sparkling like a dew-dropped rose, like the princess she was about to become. He would make Gaston pay for causing him to doubt her.
Come, my love, to the morning room. I have arranged something special just for you.
He didn't mention Gaston's trick to Cersei. It was too nasty to repeat. There was no need to cause ill will between the two. Gaston would, after all, be his best man at the wedding. Yes, he was brutish, ill-tempered, and conniving, but he was still his closest companion, and he wanted his best friend to stand beside him at his wedding. There was something else. It would please the prince to know Gaston would be seething with envy as he stood there, forced to watch the wedding proceedings, knowing his attempts to break the prince's faith in Cersei had failed, and he could not have her for himself. Yes, that would be very satisfying. Perhaps after the wedding he should send Gaston away on some errand for the kingdom, something distasteful and below his rank, to show him not to interfere again. Who could blame Gaston, really, for trying to spirit Cersei away from him? She was the prettiest girl they'd ever seen, and Gaston was only giving in to her beauty and letting it taint his better judgment. It was quite funny when you thought about it. Gaston, the prince of Butt-Chin Land, trying to take his Cersei away. Who would have a commoner, no matter how close a royal family friend he might be, when she could have the prince, who would one day be king of these lands? The prince decided to laugh the entire thing off and focus on what he loved, hunting, drinking, spending the taxes collected from his estates, and charming the ladies. Oh yes, and there was Cersei. But he loved her the way one would love his castle, or his stable stocked with the finest horses. She was the most beautiful creature, and he treasured her for how her beauty would reflect on him and his kingdom. Sensible, he thought, and he felt beyond reproach. The wedding plans continued, even though Gaston kept on about Cersei's family. Not a day or night went by that he didn't mention it.
You're starting to bore me, Gaston. Honestly, going on about this pig farm thing as if it were actually true. Why don't you give up already?
Gaston wouldn't let the issue alone.
Come with me, good friend. I will show you.
So they rode several miles until they reached the little farmhouse, which was tucked away beyond the woods on an uncommon path. There was his Cersei. She was standing in the pen, feeding the pigs, the bottom of her simple white dress caked with mud. Her hair seemed dull, and her cheeks were flushed with hard work. She must have sensed them, looking at her, for she glanced up and noticed the expression of disgust on her beloved's face, leaving her stricken with horror and shame. She dropped her pail and stood on the spot, looking at the two men. She said nothing.
Come out here, girl. Is that how you greet your guest?
The prince barked cockily. Her eyes widened as if she were coming out of a haze. Of course, she said meekly. Then she walked out of the pen and approached the men, looking up at them, still astride their horses. She felt small and meek, and unable to meet their disapproving gazes. Hello, my love. What brings you here? She asked. The prince scoffed.
What brings me here, indeed? Why didn't you tell me your father was a mere pig farmer?
Cersei looked desperate and confused, hardly able to answer. What do you mean, my dearest? The prince was enraged.
Do not play coy with me, madam. How dare you keep such a thing from me? How could you lie to me in such a manner?
Circe crumpled in tears. You never asked about my family. I never lied to you. Why should it matter? We love each other, and love conquers all.
Love you? Seriously, look at yourself covered in muck. How could I possibly love you?
He spat at the ground, and then turned his attentions to his friend.
Come on, Gaston. Let's leave this stinking place. I've nothing further to say to this filthy farm girl.
And the two men rode off, leaving the beautiful maiden covered in mud and a cloud of dust, kicked up by their wild horses.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this reading. If you haven't had a chance to, please take a second, like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, comment down below, share with a friend, and check out some of the other Villain series chapters and books as well. Join us next time, and remember, let it go and keep moving forward. Have a magical day. Bye!